Okay, let's review our polynomials and powers for our quiz. So we're going to name our polynomial by term, how many terms there are, and degree, the largest exponent on the variable. So here we're going to name by degree first, and we have a degree of 2 that is called a quadratic. And we have 3 terms, so that is a trinomial. Remember, nomial means term. Here we have a degree of 3, so that is a cubic. We have 2 terms, so that's a binomial. Here we have a degree of 3. Again, that's a cubic. We have 1 term, so that's a monomial. Here we have a degree of 4, and that is a quartic. We have 3 terms, so that's a trinomial. Here we have to be careful because we have 2 factors that are variables, so we have to include both exponents. So we would add these together, and we have a degree of 5. So this polynomial has a degree of 5, and it is a binomial. 1 and 2 terms. Here we have a degree of an understood 1 that's linear. And we have 2 terms, so that's a binomial. Here we have a degree of 2, that's a quadratic. And it's 2 terms, so it's a binomial. Here we have a degree where we have to add these up because we have multiple factors. So this has a degree of 4, this term has a degree of 2, and this term has 0 variables, so it has a degree of 0. And it has 3 terms, so it's a trinomial with a degree of 4, and we said it's a trinomial. Okay, let's look at the things that are not polynomials. So you remember you cannot have a variable underneath a square root. So this is not a polynomial. You can have a number under the radical, but just not a variable. So this is. So I'm just going to say is a polynomial. Okay, here it looks like this is not a polynomial because we have a negative exponent and we have to have whole number exponents, but with our power rules, remember, we bring this negative exponent, we bring this factor to the numerator, making it positive. So this is a polynomial. Here, this is not a whole number on this variable, this exponent, so this is not a polynomial. Here, we cannot have a variable in the denominator. It's okay to have a variable in the numerator, so this is a polynomial. Here on this variable, we have an exponent that's not a whole number, so this is not a polynomial. On this one, it looks like it's a fraction, but really when we simplify, so remember, always simplify before you classify. So this is a polynomial. Okay, let's write this polynomial. And remember, we said subtracted from and added to, you have to flip-flop. So it says that we have this trinomial is subtracted from this trinomial. So in order to subtract from it, it has to be written first. And yes, you do need to carry your parentheses when you write these. We will be dissolving the parentheses when we multiply using distributive property. So out front is an understood 1. So when you multiply by 1, you get back what it starts out to be. Here, we're not distributing a positive 1, but a understood negative 1. So that's just going to change every term in this trinomial to its opposite sign. So we get negative 7x squared plus 8x minus 2. Now we can just combine like terms. So we have our quadratic terms. Notice the sign in front. So that's negative 10x squared. We have our linear terms. So that's going to be plus 14x. And then we have our constants, minus 1 and minus 2. That gives me minus 3. So we have a quadratic trinomial. Now let's determine the perimeter of this rectangle. Perimeter is adding all sides. So I'm going to have 2 of these, right? 1 and 2. And I'm going to have 2 of these lengths here and here. So I'm going to just go ahead and double this binomial by distributing the 2. That gives me 4x squared plus 12 plus these 2 lengths. So I have 2 3x squared, so that's 6x squares. I have 2 minus 4x's, that's minus 8x, and I have 2 positive 8's, that's plus 16. And now I can combine these. So I have these 2 quadratics, that gives me 10x squared. I have this linear term, again, we're going to write it in standard form. And then I have 12 plus 16, that gives me 28. So we have a trinomial, it's a quadratic, it's written in standard form, the highest exponent down to the least. My leading coefficient is 10. Let's simplify these using our power rules. So here we're multiplying like powers, so we will be adding the exponents, but first let's multiply our coefficients. And remember, you can rearrange your term and put like factors together. So we get 12 times x, 2 plus -5 gives us -3. This -3 is attached to only the x, so we're going to reciprocate it to the denominator and make it a positive. Here we're using division, so we're going to use the quotient rule. But first, let's just rewrite like factors and then be very careful. Okay, we have this negative involved. This 16 over 12 can reduce by a factor of 4. So we have 4 over 3, and now we start with the x in the top, and I'm going to write this out. This is 5 minus -2, which is really 5 plus 2, so that is 7. So we don't have to move any factors. And our last one, a power raised to a power. Now remember, this 4 applies to every factor in our term. So this is a factor, 2, x, and y. So let's put a 1 here so we don't forget that this 4 is going to multiply times every exponent within the parentheses. So we have 2 to the 4th times x to the -12th over y to the 16th. I'm going to go ahead and evaluate 2 to the 4th, which we know is 16. I'm going to move the x factor to the denominator, making it a positive 12, and then y to the positive 16 is positive, so it stays.